Hello and welcome to our B5 lesson on growing up. This isn't a social lesson, this is a science lesson about the factors that happen during our development and growth. Anyway, enjoy. Okay, so here are our objectives for today's lesson. So by the end of this lesson on human growth, you should know and understand how to investigate potential problems with fetal development and the rates at which humans grow during different stages of their life. There are two types of fetal screening. The first is probably the most common that we're aware of, is ultrasound. And what ultrasound does is it scans to reveal the baby's sex, whether there's multiple pregnancies or the developmental defects during the early stages of pregnancy. Ultrasound, which you're probably more familiar with, sends ultrasound waves, which are sound waves, in through the placenta, and it can get an image back of the fetus. So here we've got the fetus, the uterus in which the baby is developing in, and then we've got the cervix here. The second type of fetal screening is something called amniocentesis. Now what this does is it takes cells from the fetus found in the amniotic fluid. So if we have a look at a picture of what this actually does, is here we've got a similar picture where we've got the fetus in the uterus here with the cervix here, and we take a sample of fluid from this amniotic fluid. Now what this can do is it can check the chromosome abnormalities such as Down syndrome. Now amniocentesis causes 1 in 200 miscarriages. Now if the test is positive, the parents can make a very difficult decision about whether to continue with the pregnancy or not. Some people do say that prenatal tests like this are give an unacceptable option of ending the unborn baby's life, and is very unethical. There are several stages to human growth. Now these stages are infancy to up to 2 years, childhood, which is 2 to 11 years, adolescence, which is 11 to 13 or 15 for boys, 13 for girls, 15 for boys, and then adulthood of 13 to 15 for girls, and then boys up to 60 for females, and then 65 for males, and then we've got old age, which is either 60 or 65 plus. Now, as we said, growth is measured in terms of height and mass. Now there are several factors that could be taken into consideration for how much your final height and mass might be. The first could be it's inherited through your genes. The second is obviously diet, which coincides with the third, which is the amount of exercise you do. Now the next thing that we need to consider is the amount of growth hormone that you are able to produce. Thirdly, probably not quite so obvious, but is how healthy you might be, and any diseases or illnesses that could also affect them. Now obviously diet is quite important, especially for mass, and you need to make sure you have a healthy amount of protein for muscle growth, calcium, and vitamin D, which will help for bone growth. Now also for growth, exercise will encourage muscle growth, and it can make the bones become very dense and very hard. Now the growth hormone that we just mentioned can cause people to either grow too little if they're not producing enough, or they can grow too much. Now the growth hormone is produced in the pituitary gland, and it releases energy for growth from fat stores and stimulates the growth of long bones. So we have dwarfism, which is where we have a lack of the growth hormone, and then we have gigantism, or giants, which are where we have the too much growth hormone. Okay. Now, during the stages of growth that we looked at earlier, the infancy, childhood, and so on, they have different rates of growth at different parts of the body. Now, when a baby is first born, the growth rate slows down during childhood, and then there is normally a growth spurt during puberty. Now, initially, there are 3 measurements that are taken during the first few months of a baby's life to look at their growth rates. These are head circumference, length from head to toe, and the weight. Now, these are normally done fairly regularly, and the measurements during these growth can be plotted on charts to give any indication of any height or growth problems. The measurements are normally then compared to the normal by doctors, and then any growth problems might be able to be identified. Now, if we look at some data here, this is just kind of average typical data. We've got the age of a person from 0 to 20, and we've got their growth rate in centimetres cubed per year. Now, the highest growth rate here is during the first sort of like 2 years, which is the infancy stage. Now then, after sort of 7 up to the ages of about 12 or 13, the growth rate is fairly constant. And then as we get to puberty, there is again another growth spurt, and then as you get towards adulthood, your growth rate stops increasing, and then by the time you're sort of 19, 20, your growth rate no longer increases at all. Life expectancy in the 21st century is actually going up and up and up, and there are several reasons for this. First and foremost is there are fewer industrial diseases such as asbestos, which means that there's less premature death due to working. There's also healthier diets. There's more understanding of what healthier lifestyle means, so we don't tend to die of malnutrition or anything to do with diet. There's also the better housing conditions now than there was in the past, and there's also better treatments for diseases. Now, these life expectancy or factors affecting them will bring on certain problems, and these problems can include things like degenerative illnesses such as arthritis or cancer. Chances are that you know an elderly relative that has perhaps suffered from one or both of those. Elderly people find it more difficult to live on their own. Independence is quite a big problem for them. And of course, smaller families, in the past people have tended to have big families, so they've got lots of people to support them. And also there's a limited income for elderly people that perhaps just live off a pension, and it's a lot more difficult to sustain that healthier lifestyle. Now, these problems also have an effect on these factors. Hospitals and care home can only provide short-term short-term relief for elderly patients, whereas they need proper residential care. There's also a financial part where some people will be working very long. When I started working 10 years ago, my retirement age was 65, but that's increased to 68, and it's likely to go up again, and it could even be well into the 70s by the time you guys are at work. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed learning about how we grow up, looking at problems that we might have with amniocentesis for looking at individual babies. We've looked at growth rates and when the high growth rates are. We've looked at growth difficulties like dwarfism and gigantism, and then we've looked at the problems that we have with the old folk. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed today, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.